You know, the world has an image of the king, and rightly so. But behind the image, behind the lights and the makeup and the music, there was a real human being, a real person that had feelings that was entirely different, light years away to the image. Elvis was an extremely intelligent human being.
He just wanted to know about all different kinds of aspects of life. He was always searching for something. We didn't know what it was, but as life went on, we realized that he wanted to know why he was here. Why was he picked to be this person? Why did he get all this talent?
But there were times when I looked at him, he looked very lonely, and he'd be in the middle of a bunch of people. And I'd look at him and I think, he's not even where he wants to be right there. He's not feeling anything right now.
I thought, how's he going to come out of this? And then another part of me thought, he's going to. He will come out of it. Then the other voice in me said, no, this is not good. He's reaching the end of his road.
In 1950's Memphis, Tennessee, a star was born. Elvis Aaron Presley went from introvert Memphis truck driver to rock and roll superstar in a mere 18 months. The polite Southern boy became the hottest draw on national TV, and in 1956, he was the best rising singer in the entertainment industry. His vocals were raw and he sang from the heart. His provocative moves and style were unlike anything audiences had ever seen. People loved him. People went crazy for him. He was a real turn-on. On stage, he looked almost possessed, some would say even vulgar. Some of his performances were even censored on TV. It is safe to say he was controversial, but a star nonetheless. He was the best-looking man many people said they'd ever seen. People wanted to look like him. He became almost a Greek god for women and men, a perfect specimen.
He had the look, he had the attitude. It was natural with him too. He's the only star I have ever met that looked like, acted like a special person, a star, before he had a hit record, before he did a movie. I've met a lot of those stars that movies and records and adulation and all those things kind of make you into a star. Elvis was born a star.
Elvis had a tremendous draw to him emotionally and physically, where you looked at him and you thought, that is probably about the best looking man I've ever seen, you know? He just had a charisma about him. He had a way of pulling you in. People call it Southern charm. He had it in spades.
In 1954, Larry Geller becomes his personal hairstylist and spiritual guide, which many considered an odd combination. Larry not only played a big part in shaping Elvis's iconic hairstyle, but he also started to change his mentality. He put Elvis on a path of self-realization, which made it difficult for his entourage to relate. Only his close friends were the same path, as it allowed him to have more intimate conversations with him.
Larry was a strange bird for our group, you know? That probably took a lot of pressure off of me with Larry coming in. I look like one of the boys.
You know, Larry was very nice at first. We didn't know too much about him. I mean, he was a Los Angeles guy. He was a hairdresser. He was introduced to us by Elvis's barber before him. And he was very pleasant and nice. But then we didn't realize that Larry was very much into, what would you say, different kinds of religions, different ideas about life and philosophies. Elvis and Larry talked a lot together, hours and hours on end. It was not something I was interested in. I wasn't interested in all these different philosophies of life and why we're here and all that stuff. I didn't care. I was just having a good time. But they spent a lot of time talking about that, and Elvis really got into it. And Elvis started reading books about different religions. He got into all religions. He just wanted to know about all different kinds of aspects of life. He was always searching for something. We didn't know what it was, but as life went on, we realized that he wanted to know why he was here. Why was he picked to be this person? Why did he get all this talent?
Larry was very quiet-spoken, but then he started introducing his Far Eastern, what I call California cult crap. I mean, I'm not putting anybody's beliefs down, but it was a typical spiritual cult deal that some people in California love. And he started talking to Elvis about it. And Elvis was, you know, was interested because it gave him something new. And as the years went by, I started calling Larry the Swami, because first of all, I don't trust people like that. I think they're full of shit. I think they have an ulterior motive.
Larry would bring a book or a couple of books and say, man, you might like this or whatever. And then Elvis would kind of try to share that with the rest of us. It was a tough turnaround for some of the guys to be playing football all the time and doing karate, and to now sit down and read books about Indian philosophy.
Elvis devoured the books immediately. In fact, when we left Southern California to drive back to Memphis, every hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, Elvis, who used to drive, would pull over and start reading. And this kind of blew everyone's mind. The guys weren't used to this.
A lot of people close to Elvis didn't understand it and didn't want to understand it. They didn't like what Larry brought into his life. So even though Larry himself didn't have a problem with the Memphis Mafia, his affection for them wasn't reciprocated.
This group around Elvis, we were such an exclusive group, unique. It was our own little special Elvis brotherhood. We lived with one another. Philosophically, most of them didn't agree with me at all. Perhaps I don't agree with them. Below all that, putting that aside, I have a deep love for all these people. I really do. You know, the world has an image of the king, and rightly so. But behind the image, behind the lights and the makeup and the music, there was a real human being, a real person that had feelings that was entirely different, light years away to the image. Elvis was an extremely intelligent human being. He had great instincts, and he was up to the challenge of reading. Now, he just barely got through high school. I remember he used to say to me, he said, man, I don't know how I got through high school. I used to sit in class and just stare out the window and just daydream. I would dream of myself being on the big screen someday. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed my discussions with Elvis. And what I'm referring to is that every day, for years, Elvis and I would spend at least an hour, sometimes 2 to 3 hours, discussing life, his life, religion, whatever. But we got into these type of philosophical, metaphysical conversations every day. And I enjoyed it so much because I saw this person who started to just blossom spiritually. He had so many questions about life, about the Bible, about his career, about where he was going in life. And this developed and cultivated over the years, and I just enjoyed it so much. And this is basically what I wanted. I had a wonderful job. I was being paid beautifully by Elvis. And at the same time, I was able to enable him and provide for him the material and the friendship that he needed. Because here's a guy that, look, he was beyond a superstar. Elvis was beyond that. He was something else. Wherever he went, he was besieged by people. So he created his own world, his own universe. And within himself, he would travel to China or to India or to England or to Germany and to the 12th century or 2,000 years ago. And he was able to do this. And we had the most magnificent time together over the years until he passed away.
Elvis enjoyed being around friends and he was generous, but he had a passion for excess. He spent money like there was no tomorrow. He even gave away 13 Cadillacs, including to a lady that was just passing by.
Elvis was a dynamic personality, and I'm not talking about on the stage. There was something about him that was special. I mean, whether you want to call it a charisma, magnetism, or what have you. Most times he showed you that he cared.
He was like my brother and my father. Everything rolled into one because he took care of so many problems for me. Financial, a lot of times spiritually too. We'd talk about problems and things.
We worked together, we lived together, we cried together, we laughed together. And when he bought me my house in 1974, he said, "You know why I bought you that house?" And I said, I still don't believe the whole process, Elvis. And he said, "You never had a home, and I wanted to be the one to give it to you." Before we became that close of friends, I thought Elvis Presley had everything. You know, that was the answer to life, is to have a lifestyle like that. Not true, you know?
In the early 60s, he started taking drugs and became obsessed with guns.
He always had a fondness for guns. We used to, as an example, even in the very early 60s, we used to go snake hunting. There was this lake near Graceland where we'd take shotguns and he'd kill the snakes. And one time, he almost shot Joe Esposito. Elvis took aim and shot the snake's head off while Joe was holding his hand. I'm glad it wasn't me. But he always had that fondness, but it got even more when he started putting it in terms of protection. We used to joke because he used to have a gun here, and a gun here, and a gun here, and a gun in his boot, and a gun in his back. And he'd just go out to go to the movies.
His addictive personality quickly got him hooked on cocaine and prescription drugs.
In order to go to sleep, you need to start taking sleeping pills, downers, or tranquilizers, or what have you. So it gets to be a vicious circle. And where today one will work, tomorrow you need 2, and the next day you need 3, and then the next day you need 4. And after 15 years, you know, it gets pretty vicious.
Elvis had an addictive personality, so I think that it probably, but I mean, he would walk away from it, but then he'd go back to it. So it, you know, it was a magic potion, so to speak. It really was. It kept us going.
Still, it put you in a depressing mood. It took you a couple hours to wake up in the morning, to get your head clear and everything. And these are all the symptoms he had too. When you get up, you're grouchy as hell, and you don't want anybody to mess with you until you've had coffee, until your head starts clearing up, and the sleeping pills and stuff start wearing off, because you can get pretty mean
Elvis Presley no longer has that rock and roll beat. The tempo is hut 2, 3, 4 for Private Presley. He's at Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, beginning his 2-year Army hitch courtesy of the Memphis Draft Board. Like any ex-civilian raw recruit, the king of rock and roll will be keeping time to non-hip bugle calls. Involuntarily retired, a gyrating guitarist's departure from the public eye left his blue jean pants.
In 1958, Elvis was sent to the Army. His mom became very depressed. After his identical twin brother died at birth, she couldn't cope with him going away too. She said to him, "Don't forget me, little." She died not long after that same year. It was traumatic and he was unconsolable. Some say it was an underlying cause for Elvis's so-called descent into hell.
Well, Elvis's life was not typical GI. I mean, there was always people outside of his house. The fans were always out there. It was a little tougher for him to be in the Army because everybody was watching him. And they were keeping an eye on him to make sure he did a good job and make sure he didn't goof off. So it was tougher for him than a lot of the other GIs.
The Army was tough, although he met his wife Priscilla there. Priscilla was the daughter of a U.S. Air Force officer. She was very shy and very young, but they clicked.
Very pretty young lady, but I didn't know how old she was at the time. And I figured she was about 16, but at the time she was 14, I find out later. But she was very mature, very quiet at first.
Sometimes things clicked, and they seemed to click. Whenever anyone talks about the Presley marriage and how sad it's divorce and all that stuff, I just think you got to look at the good years, because the pressure on being married to a guy like that, it's just ridiculous. And the temptations a guy like that's offered are just ridiculous. And the hours he's away are just ridiculous. And you don't know what's going on. You're out of the loop so many times in a career decision. You know, Colonel Tom Parker's not going to stop something happening in Las Vegas or a film being filmed because Priscilla puts her foot down. It's not going to happen. A marriage like that, as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty much doomed, even when there's respect and love thrown in the equation.
Elvis liked to have his friends and buddies around him. He enjoyed their company. It made him comfortable, and he was basically a very shy person until he got to know you. So once he got comfortable around you, he'd rather have those people around him instead of strangers. Now, you got to remember, I met him only about the last 7 months of his duty in the Army. And so he was over there for quite a while. So he had a lot of other good Army buddies, too. And he had a couple of friends from Memphis there. Red West was there. Lamar Fike was there. So they were always around.
Despite being shy, Elvis had a short temper. He was jealous and sensitive, but he enjoyed surrounding himself with family and friends, and he loved the attention. He always wanted people to stay connected with him, and loyalty was important to him.
Elvis had a temper. He had a bad temper. His mother had one, and I think he got that from her, but that's about the only quality that he got from her that wasn't good, because everything else about her was giving and warm and sharing and everything. His temper was like a black cloud when it came in full blown, buddy. It was a Category 5 tornado, okay? It just covered all the area around, the whole room, the whole atmosphere. And you didn't know until you knew who it was about that had got him that way, what thoughts, who he was thinking about that got him this, or who had done something. You may have done something the night before.
There was no in-betweens. It was really the nicest guy in the world, or sometimes he would snap and just have a real bad temper, and he'd scare the hell out of you sometimes. There was one instance I remember during the movie Wild in the Country. Christina Crawford, Joan Crawford's daughter, was one of the co-stars in the movie. Well, we became friends, and I invited her up to the house one evening to hang out. You know, Elvis knew who she was. So we're sitting there watching a little TV and sitting on the couch, and this big couch at the house on Perugia Way, and Elvis would smoke cigars once in a while, so he picked up a cigar to smoke, take a cigar, and I reached over and lit his cigar for him. And she pulled my hand away from him. I went to do it again, and she pulled the cigar out of Elvis's mouth. She says, now you shouldn't have to light a cigar. And I say, hey, don't do that. So Elvis really got mad. He got up and he grabbed her by the hair and pulled her across the coffee table, which scared the hell out of me and everybody else, and they were really in shock. And he said, get her out of here. Take her home. Well, I didn't know what to do. I mean, this is the first time this ever happened to me around Elvis. The first time I saw his temper like that.
He'd say things that you've never heard before in your life. He would string expletives together and make words that you've never heard of. And he'd be mad, but he'd stay mad for maybe 30 minutes, and then it'd be over. He fired us en masse 10 times. Every one of you guys, get the fuck out of here.
But somehow, he was still isolated. Despite the fans and his Memphis Mafia, he was lonely.
He could be, and I saw this, but I don't dream about it, I don't think about it. But there were times I looked at him and he looked very lonely, and he'd be in the middle of a bunch of people. And I'd look at him and I think, he's not even where he wants to be right there. He's not feeling anything right now. Times I'd go over to him, I say, hey, boss. Hey, Sonny. About ready to go? Yeah, let's go. Get him out of that. He wasn't enjoying it.
His earnings from records alone totaled nearly $2 million. He was and still is the best-selling single recording artist in history.
I understand that you want to become a dramatic actor, is that right?
Well, so that's my big ambition now. It takes a lot of time, a lot of experience, but I hope I'll make it. I mean, that's what I want to do.
When he comes back from the Army, Presley had been away for 2 years. He was unsure about his return, so he retired from live performing, and guided by Colonel Parker, his manager, he devotes much of the 1960s to making Hollywood films and soundtrack albums, most of them critically derided. Soon after, his personal life started becoming unstable. He became wild again.
All of us became, Elvis and the boys. It was pretty wild, and but we were a bad wild. I mean, we liked to have a good time. It was never like we were out drinking, being drunk, and falling all over the place and doing terrible things. We just loved to chase women, and it was great. And we partied all night as much as we could. And we'd be up till 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. The sun would rise, and we'd go right to sleep. Get away from the sun. We didn't want to see the sun. And we just did this for a week, 10 days. Elvis said, okay, we got to get out of here. We got to go back to LA. And we get in the car, start driving. I said, Elvis, why do we have to go back now? He said, well, I don't know. I just thought we'd been here too long. He said, let's go back. We turn around, go right back. We stayed 2 or 3 weeks at a time and just party. And one time, I forget, we were going so hard that Elvis started getting a bloody nose. And we went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you guys need to get some rest. His resistance was getting down, and he kept getting a bloody nose, so we had to rest for a couple of days.
In 1968, he returns to the stage with a comeback on the acclaimed NBC TV special, Elvis, which leads to a string of highly profitable concerts in Vegas. All in all, his comeback's a very big success. The King was at his peak as Vegas brought out the best of him. He's back on the road and unbeatable again, or so it seems. His obsession for excess had resurfaced.
I was there seeing concerts in 55 and 56 and 57. The most exciting, raw, animalistic things I've ever seen. And of course, that will always be my lifelong image of Elvis Presley. You know, the wild guy on stage, the sensitive, lovable guy on stage. He could be all those things. When I went to work for him in '64, he had been back from the Army 4 years, and he did 2 or 3, good movies when he came back. But the movies were getting weaker and weaker, and the soundtracks were getting, in some cases, more ridiculous and more ridiculous.
His peak was quickly followed by further complications. By the late 60s and into the 70s, Elvis started to realize that Hollywood was ripping him off. He was at a low point in his career, and the crowd was getting tired of the same cheesy movies and songs that were getting more and more ridiculous.
Being in Hollywood is not as glamorous as people think it is. Sure, it's nice if you've never been there and you've never done it, and you get to go do it once or twice, but do it 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and you'll find out it's not as glamorous as people think it is.
Elvis has given up on some of his dreams at this particular point. Every time he really tries to pursue something that he wants to do, it is undermined by the exact people who could do it. I think he's getting tired. I think he's getting bored. But for us that really knew Elvis most of his life, this was not the norm for him. There's no way of getting around the fact that the drugs were affecting him, not just physically.
So Colonel Parker would have seen the Bobby Darrens and the Frank Sinatras and known what to do. Let's make him an all-round entertainer. So that's what deluded Elvis, in my opinion. He was a brilliant singer and a brilliant performer. He was a very uneven actor. I mean, there's odd things like Flaming Star that I'll see and I think, God, he's actually pretty good in this, you know? But most of his films are kind of dismissible. He's not challenged, for one. They're not great scripts. So that's what happened to Elvis. The reason people talk about he wasn't as good after he came out of the Army, it's because they tried to put too much on him.
In 1972, another hard blow hits him. Priscilla leaves him for a karate teacher, Mike Stone. When he found out about the affair, he wanted to hire a hitman to kill her partner. But after some convincing, he decided not to. In the end, he couldn't blame her.
Priscilla was married, Elvis wasn't. I think it's a good way to say it. And it really, you know, he didn't consider himself married, only she did. It wasn't because Priscilla left for Mike Stone. I think it was she had the effrontery to leave him. And I think that's where it all started from. The pressure was really starting to ramp up pretty bad, you know, and he was losing, and he Elvis didn't like to lose. But I don't think it's Elvis more so than any other man, especially when you find out she's going out with somebody else. It's a blow to any man's psyche. I don't think that, and especially to his.
Elvis reached out to Larry, and they decide to go to Vegas. It's the beginning of the next phase of his life.
One afternoon, I get a phone call from John. He said, Larry, Elvis needs you, man. I said, what do you mean? He said, he broke up with Priscilla. She left him. He's going through a lot. He called me up, and he told me he's going through a lot of things, and I just know that you've got to be in his life again. Let's go to Vegas. I said, okay, let's go. So Johnny and his girlfriend and a few other people and I, we went to Vegas. We sat in one of Elvis's booths. During the show, Elvis introduced Johnny to the audience. When the show was over, the maitre d' came up and said, Elvis would like you all to come backstage. And I hadn't seen Elvis in a couple of years. We went backstage. Elvis came out of his dressing room, he walked up to me, and we just hugged. And that was the beginning of the next phase. There were several years from the end of 1967 until mid-72 that I left on my own reconnaissance, and I stepped away from Elvis's world because there was a lot of resentment between the guys who worked for Elvis and especially Colonel Parker, who thought that I had an agenda, that I was trying to take Elvis away from him and perhaps become his manager or lead him down a path that was contrary to what the Colonel had in mind for Elvis. Nothing could be further from the truth. I did want Elvis to wake up. And if I had an agenda, that was it. For Elvis to wake up and to become his own man and to do the things that I know that Elvis really wanted to do. Now, at the end of Elvis's life, there's no question about it. He was on the verge and made plans to fire Colonel Parker, to cut down his entourage to 4 to 5 people. He wanted an entire new career, a new life, a new lifestyle. And he got to a point with his life where he realized that he was taking medications and poison that was being administered to him by various doctors. He wanted to put a halt to his career. He didn't want to tour anymore. He was going to take 1 year off, go to Hawaii, and spend the time rejuvenating himself, changing his diet entirely, exercising, recharging his batteries, then re-entering Hollywood once more as a dramatic actor.
During a closing night performance on the CBS special in 1973, Elvis was forced to go on by Parker, despite him not being in good shape. The story goes he stormed into Elvis's dressing room to confront him.
Door opened up, Colonel Parker walks up to me and stands and I get up, we stand toe to toe, and he stares coldly into my eyes. He says, "Now you listen to me. The only thing that's important is that that man is on stage tonight. Nothing else matters. Nothing." He turned around and walked out.
And after a heated argument, Parker is fired. But just a few days later, he had no choice but to take him back due to Parker quoting him an enormous bill.
My heart sank. He didn't care. He didn't care. What about Elvis? What about Elvis? Elvis is not a tomato can. He's not a commodity. He's a human being. Elvis should have gotten rid of him years and years ago. Elvis knew it. Elvis was a good guy. He was a loyal guy. Maybe he had a bit to do with his own masochism, but he should have gotten rid of Colonel Parker. And he knew it, and he was going to do it. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that if Elvis would have lived, he would have gotten rid of Colonel Parker.
He was on tour, but he wasn't well. Despite this, Parker wanted the show to go on. He became a puppet whose strings were being pulled. He rarely got the upper hand on the Colonel. Parker was always in charge.
When I saw the CBS special, I was shocked and I was pissed. And I called Colonel Parker one of the few times I ever did on a negative. How could you let him? I called him and I went and met with him. How could you let him be on camera like that? And he said, "You're a manager," because I managed the Beach Boys at this time. "You're a manager. You have to give the artist offers." I said, "How could you?" He said, "I put an offer out there that was ridiculous." And CBS came back with it, and I took it to Elvis, and he wanted to do it. The point is that he wasn't in great shape when I left, but he certainly wasn't. When I saw that, yeah, the man looked like he was going to die, and of course he did.
By the mid-70s, his health was deteriorating. He had gained weight. He was depressed and isolated, obese, on prescription drugs, paranoid, and a gambling addict.
Whoever has not seen Elvis live has missed the greatest entertainer of the 20th century, the greatest star of the 20th century. But when I saw him, my heart sank because I knew that something was wrong. I could see it in his eyes, I saw it in his face. And I remember turning to Johnny and Jules, a friend of ours, I said, he can't last like this another 5 years. Why I said that, I don't know why I said 5 years, because 5 years later, we were 1977, the year Elvis passed away. But I could tell that there were physical problems. The body doesn't hide anything. You just can't, and especially when you know someone.
Things started happening to him that were not normal. And the doctors being around, I look at, I watch. I'm not clairvoyant, and I'm not anything like that. I just look at things, and things are not normal. I pick up on it.
He didn't care anymore if he performed well or not. He stopped trying. He even forgot the lyrics to his own song. He became the fat, bloated Elvis. He even said himself that he got tired of being Elvis.
I was so scared. I cannot tell you how scared I was. I was so, I mean, like, I'm talking like wring your hands, walk the floor scared. He would petrify me, the things he would do. It would just, I mean, I would just lose I'd go, dear God, I would lose my breath. I used to go back and say, what the fuck are you doing? You can't do what you're doing. You can't do it. And he just kept on.
These were prescription drugs. In his mind, were not illegal drugs. Now, the doctor's writing them for him. He's abusing them, but they're not illegal drugs. In his mind, as intelligent as Elvis was in so many ways, he was naive in thinking that there were separate issues there, because there really wasn't. In 1975, what I had been seeing a little bit of the previous year or so was getting worse, and I was very concerned about his health.
You know, so many stories have circulated over the years about Elvis was a drug taker. Elvis was a druggie. Well, there is some truth into that. But if you don't have the real story, and if you weren't there to see it, there's no way you can know what was really going on. Number one, and this is the foundation, Elvis had a lot of physical problems that were really eating away at him. He had glaucoma. He had hypertension. Do you know that every night after a show, his blood pressure would shoot up to 180, 200 every night? And that's a tremendous strain on the heart. Elvis had a spastic, twisted colon. I can't tell you the problems that plagued him because of it. How uncomfortable he was, and how his body, especially the lower part of his body, started to blow up and balloon. He also had his blood sugar that was a little too high. His body would start to get bruises on his leg. One night we were on tour, and when Elvis left the stage, he was totally blinded because of all the flash cubes going off, the glaucoma, his sensitive eyes. He tripped and fell down the stairs at the back of the stage, twisted his ankle, and he had a very difficult time after that moving on stage. So the doctor was giving him medications every night to go to sleep. And I say medications, euphemistically, we're talking about poison. That's really what it was. Elvis did not need these anymore. And he knew it. It's not like Elvis was in the dark. Elvis was abusing them. He's responsible, but he's also a victim. He was a victim because doctors were giving medications to him to help his conditions, all his various conditions. The combinations of these drugs were lethal. It only increased his health problems, no question about it. Two major dynamic themes were controlling Elvis's life at the end, and they were paralleling one another. Life, the future, a new career, health, death, disease, darkness. They were both there simultaneously, and I saw clearly, and it really, really tore me up. I would go to my room certain nights and just cry. I felt helpless. I would pray to God. I thought that was the only thing I could really do outside of being Elvis's friend and telling him what I knew to be true about his health, about making changes, The only thing I can do is pray. One night, I thought, I got to go tell someone. I got to talk to these guys. Some of them I knew not to talk to. Others I thought were open. And, you know, all the people around Elvis, they all loved him. Even the ones that enabled him. There were some guys in the group that were terrific. They were excellent human beings. I remember one guy I went to after the concert one night. I went into his room, and I said to him, I said, "I'm really, really nervous." He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "What's wrong? Look at Elvis. Look what's going on. The man is sick. He's got such problems. I'm afraid something's going to happen." The guy said, "Wait a minute. Wait, Larry. No. You're the one who has the problem. Come on, you know about negativity. If you keep thinking this way, you're going to get sick. That's Elvis. What can happen to Elvis? In 20 years from now, he's going to look better than he does today. He's a singer. Singers rejuvenate themselves. They live to be really old. Dad, don't make yourself sick." I left his room and I thought, this is madness. This is crazy. This is insane. They understand that they're in total denial of what's going on. One or two people were quite aware. Joe Esposito, for sure, knew that Elvis was in a problem here, in a problematic state. Several of the other people, total denial.
Vegas was over. They were destroyed. He dies at just 42 years old in 1977 from cardiac arrhythmia, alone. His death made a lot of people angry.
Anger didn't hit me until 2 weeks later. I literally went berserk. There was a marble fireplace, and I realized I'd never see Elvis Presley again. And it's the first time I realized it. And I hit this wall so hard, I crushed my hand. I had to have an operation.
It's almost like predestination. It was like he was, I've always said that Elvis was like a artillery shell. They loaded him up, fired him, and he fell out of the ark. And just it went into the ground and blew up. I think that if it was God's plan or whatever, I don't know what the plans were, maybe it was God's plan.
I always said my relationship with Elvis Presley is based on friendship. The job comes second. If I would have known in 75, early 76, that we were going to lose Elvis, I would not have left. Not that I could have saved him, but I would have wanted to spend as much time as possible around him, even in those circumstances.
Ironically, even some of his closest friends were shocked. But the warning signs were there.
I thought, how's he going to come out of this? And another part of me thought, he's going to. He will come out of it. Then the other voice in me said, no, this is not good. He's reaching the end of his road, the end of his rope. And then the other voice would say, no, it's going to be all right. He said we're going to Hawaii. He's going to make changes. So I would flip-flop. And I couldn't, it's very difficult to face the inevitable. Even though I saw it, I had hope. He was making changes. He had a vision for the future. So in this very last conversation with Elvis, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, he sounds okay. All right. He said, Larry, did you bring those books for me? I said, oh yeah, I got those books. He said, well, why don't you go and bring them? I said, Elvis, come on, man, get some sleep, get rest. We got a whole tour. We'll talk every day. I said, look, I'll be here tomorrow. I'll come upstairs. We'll do your hair. We have to dye it. I'll bring you the books. He said, okay, Larry, but remember one thing. Angels fly because they take themselves so lightly. We both laughed. Hung up the phone. It's the last time I ever spoke to Elvis. His body was found on the floor in an embryonic position with a book clutched to his chest. Elvis died reading about Jesus. You know, Elvis was into Judaism. He was into reading about meditation techniques in Hinduism. But basically, he was a Christian, and he read about Jesus dying. That says quite a bit. Memories just started cascading down. Memories of the first night that I met Elvis, telling me how I must have been plucked out of the millions and millions of lives to be Elvis. There has to be a reason. And things of the last 13, 14 years. And having the unique relationship that I did have with him. But his death, you know, the day he died, and then I went to the mortuary to do his hair, I thought to myself then and there, I'll never be the same again. And I haven't been. It's almost like my soul ruptured, so to speak. Yes, you know, you come to terms with it, but it stays with you. And that moment, those moments of his death have remained until this very moment, and I'm sure they will until I take my last breath. Changed my life entirely. I have been speaking about Elvis since he passed away. I've written my book and worked on another book. And the reason I have done and do what I do is very, very simple. And that's because Elvis asked me to. Several months before he passed away, we were on tour in Detroit, Michigan. And Elvis walked up to me, we were in his suite, and he pointed outside where the fans were, because he always knew where the fans were. And he pointed, he said, you know, they know Elvis all right, but they don't know me. They have no idea of what I'm going through, about my health problems, what I'm aspiring to, about the books I read, about that vision I had in the desert. And I need to know right now that you're with me and that you're going to tell the truth. Because if the world doesn't know about where I'm at spiritually, they're going to have a distorted picture of me. They'll never have a true basis to understand where I was coming from and what I'm really all about and what I want to give to this planet and how I want to help people. And I said, Elvis, am I with you? Of course I'm with you. We shook on it. We hugged on it. We bonded. And I'm telling whatever I know to be true from my point of view and from the intimate relationship that I had with Elvis from the very beginnings in 1964 until he passed away.
I think I've come to terms with this, losing him and everything now. I still get very pissed off about it. Like Lamar was saying the other night, it took a while. I didn't get pissed off right away. I was too hurt, too confused, too frustrated over not being able to do anything to stop it. But I get pissed off, and I get pissed off with the people that help contribute to it, and not just the doctors, and not just the guys that got the stuff to him, but I get pissed off at Elvis. He was a smart man. He knew what he was doing.
Elvis was the best solo music artist of all time, but he got lost along the way and never had the chance to look back.
Always lived very quiet life. I ain't never did no wrong. Now I know that very quiet life has been too lonely, too long. One night with you.
He remained the shy Southern boy with a strong personality and a deep affinity to African American music, and a patriot to his core.
Elvis is everywhere. Elvis is a king. He's no longer an American icon. He's a world figure, and he won't be erased. In 200 years, 2,000 years, people will be talking about Elvis. And they'll have forgotten a lot of prime ministers of England, of Great Britain, and they will have forgotten a lot of presidents of the United States. I promise you. But they will remember Elvis. People want to be rich and famous, maybe. But you don't want to be Elvis Presley. You don't want to be one of the Beatles. Come on. That kind of life the pressure's ridiculous. And for each and every beneficial, wonderful gift one's given, I can tell you from my work as a music journalist and just as a musician, from playing with people much more famous and successful than myself, for every beneficial, wonderful gift you're given, there is an almost equal, if not equal or greater than the gift, weight that you're given, responsibility that you're given. It's very difficult to shirk.
He was the most generous, the most beautiful, inside and out human being you ever want to meet. Whoever would meet him today would become his friend, and he would probably give you a gift, something, a ring, a watch, a car, something. That was the kind of guy he was. But his blind spot was his body, what he put into his system. He wanted to change it. He was going to do it. And that, now we're down to the nitty-gritty here. This is the matrix of Elvis Presley. His life, no matter how glorious it was, he sold more records than any human being that ever lived. You can take all the great stars of the 20th century, starting with Rudolph Valentino, John Wayne, Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, Frank Sinatra. You put them all together, more people go visit Elvis at Graceland each year than all the rest combined. Even though these are great stars, Elvis was something else. But at the same time, he was a victim. No question about it.
He was an incredible talent, but a complicated man. He found fame, but lost himself.
Elvis was a very complicated human being, very unpredictable. When you thought you got to know Elvis, the next day you'd meet a different guy. Well, he was always the same person, but that same person could be a very physical, outgoing guy's guy, and this could go on for a couple of years. Fighter, tough guy. And about the time you bought him a gun for Christmas, he was into Bibles and philosophy. I never got bored being around Elvis Presley.
There really wasn't much that Elvis couldn't get if he really went after it, whether it was from Southern charm or just a strong conviction of saying, I'm going to do that and that's it. And that's what we always admired about him. But those things slipped away in the latter years. He didn't have the strong convictions.
Nobody wants to die, and nobody wants to, especially die alone, I don't think. But, I mean, as it was, he fell forward on the floor and died. It's horrendous. I mean, somebody should have got in there to him, and I won't say names, but I thought that he had so much more to offer. I mean, this man was so multi-talented. And he's a guy who never had acting school and was turning into a really good actor, I thought. And he was just a lot of good songs left in him, could sing his butt off. He was just a good person.
He gave so much to the world, but left with so little.
I mean, he was responsible for so much, and yet when he died, he took so little with him. He didn't have the chance to really enjoy what he could enjoy. Clint Eastwood said in the picture, he said, you know, so when a man dies, you take everything away from him, everything he's ever going to get, everything he's had. And that's pretty lonely. And when you look back at what he's done and his body of work and what he created, it's absolutely unbelievable.
He reached heights that may never be matched with, but he spiraled out of control.
All I could think of was the good things. That's what happens. That's weird. You can have some problems with someone, but boy, when they pass away, they don't even come into the thought. It's all good, fun, warm, good things.
I thought he had no right to die. I thought he had no right to die at that age. I think that he left too much on the table. If anybody ever left too much on the table, Elvis did.
You know, not a day goes by that something doesn't happen in my life that someone doesn't spark something in me, thoughts about Elvis. You leave these little laughing machines with the gigglers on these little things you press and they start laughing. It's a weird, it makes you laugh. You're laughing because you're hearing a little machine laugh. And with him, it was so infectious when he laughed. Anytime you hear him, Elvis, that's the way it is, or any film on him, audio, you hear that laughter. And it makes you sit there and chuckle right then. You start laughing with him. And that's what was going through our mind. And when Red came over, we talked about what all had gone wrong so fast. And tell you what, I miss him today.
The king's story had ended, and his destiny became tragedy.